Hey, happy to be here.
Hi, Gary. Gosh,
Hi.
it's so fantastic to have you. I I want to just say how we found you, and also just how amazing it is that I managed to get you to come talk to us.
Yeah, I'm glad you
So
did. I'm glad you found me.
yeah, well, so actually, one of my collaborators, Nick O'Leary, who's a wonderful director and game designer and does a lot of participatory work. We were having a conversation about books and stuff, and he just basically did a Google search and found your book. And I was amazed because I'm always interested in when people think they're doing something new, it's almost never the case. And there's almost always, I know this from having been in like VR in the 90s. Uh, and so I was like, oh my God, this guy's been writing about this forever. And I immediately got your book and started reading it and have been referencing it in some of my writings. And so I want to start the conversation kind of jumping off from the title, which is something you said to me in an email. You said, I've devoted my life to the alchemy of abolishing the fourth wall, which is why I decided to name the session this, because I thought it was a powerful statement, and it's not trivial. It's like you have a mission. And so I really want to start with the question of why. Why have you devoted your life to abolishing the fourth wall?
Why have I devoted my life to this obscure little form of the theater for my entire life? Well, I write this in the book, in the first part of the book, for the same reason. Why am I into this thing? And I was 9 years old when I saw my first play at the Arena Theater in Boston. We saw Man of La Mancha. And it was this beautiful theater in the round, and so the staging was all in the center part of the stage with the lights coming down, so this big globe, this pool of light, and this wonderful reality taking place. And I was 9 years old, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to be part of that, to be down there with the muleteers fighting to protect Aldonza, whatever, and my little 9-year-old self. And I write this in the book, so it's a story that's told. But I seriously thought about getting up out of my seat, being so entranced with the thing, and walking down the aisle and walking in to the thing. And it didn't take too long for me to realize that my parents would be really upset with that, and I'd be thrown out of the theater. But as that first draw to break that barrier, to walk into that alternate reality, that fantasy reality, that created reality, is like, wow. And it was, of course, many years later I got involved in the theater and acting and comedy, and then I got very involved in directing. I decided I wanted to be a director, turned into a producer director, which is harder, but pays the bills. But in direction, I was always fascinated in school with what was then called environmental theater, where you try to place the stage in different places in the audience. So I was way into environmental theater, and I wanted to take it a little farther, and found ways to do that, and just to make the audience person feel like they are part of that unfolding reality. But not only that, to have them to be able to contribute and affect an outcome in that place. So you can't pre-write it. So I got very involved in improvisation and devised theater, and tried to merge the three, and just fortunately had opportunities every year to come back and play with things. I've done a lot of large like international interactive things, and built interactive environments, and started theaters and that sort of thing. But through the whole thing, some 40 odd years, I've been able to go back to this little upstate New York Renaissance Festival. Renaissance festivals aren't interactive events per se, but I casted a professional group of actors, and we played with that. What if we were the town of Warwickshire, England in 1585, on a day that the Queen came through and visited, and it's all sort of like crazy comic Shakespearean characters, and let's just run around the woods, and let's treat everyone who walked in not as a visitor or a person from a strange land, but as one of our town people, one of our friends, and see if we can get them to play along with us. And I had the advantage of experimenting in this little petri dish, mostly because people left me alone. They didn't understand it. In fact, a lot of my career is because we don't know how to do this stuff, so you can do it. And I was able to experiment each and every year, playing with different ideas, and eventually developed a technique which worked, I thought, and became the book. And I think I published it in '97 after a good 10, 15 years of playing with the idea. And I played with it since. But that's how I got into it, that fascination, my fascination of the theater with being a part of it, and found techniques and ways of making audiences feel that way too, you know. And to your first question, why the art of play, is that, well, theater is play. I mean, they call it a play, right? And a play, I realize, is just this foundational aspect of being human. It's not a creation of culture. It's beyond culture. I mean, even animals play, and we have this intense need for play, and often lose it as we grow older, and the world gangs up on us. We're not running around like children. You're playing cops and robbers and King Arthur and Guinevere in the yard, where we have responsibilities, and so our ability to connect that inner child with play diminishes as we get older. And I thought, what a great thing to do as a theatrical career is to poke at that barrier and try to get people encouraged and invested in breaking that, playing along kind of thing. Whenever you get people to play, they change, and they relax and become more themselves. So it's really the art of play. Getting people to play is a kind of art form. It's a technique employed for a particular outcome. So that it's an art, and I thought that was a nifty title. And it sort of, at the time, it paralleled with who is it, Lao Tzu, but The Art of War. I thought it'd be a great antithesis to The Art of War. No, this is The Art of Play.
Nice. I want you to. I'm going to want to dig a little more deeply into a couple things. So you've used the word techniques a couple of times, and you've also talked about the Renaissance Fair. And it's funny because for a long time, I've used the Renaissance Fair as a model for online games, which is my research, or has been my research specialty, because I feel like it has a really nice structure of opting into participation at various levels. But I hadn't really ever thought about the performers and what the role the actors were playing. So I'd love you to start with sort of what kinds of things did you do in working on the Renaissance Fair, and how did those sort of become the techniques that you start to talk about in the book?
I sort of accidentally fell into the Renaissance Festival 1979 when they were really kind of still young. And most Renaissance festivals, I was a theater kid. I was graduated from theater, and I wanted to do theater, and I fell into running the entertainment for this festival, and I thought, well, why not add actors to it? Most Renaissance festivals now, I mean, there are only a few. There's one I started in Pennsylvania that does a professional acting company, but only if you have a a regular summer stock professional acting company do characters and do that interactive thing. Mm-hmm. Most Renaissance festivals, as lovely events as they are, hire the variety acts, and it's a lot of local people who go in and play. They dress up and they play characters, and there's certainly an entertainment aspect to the activities that they engage in. But if you think of it as a circle, a lot of the characters who local characters, community theater people who will be at a Renaissance festival, if it's a circle, that's the circle facing inward. You're watching their play. And I wanted to turn the circle inside out. As actors, we're facing outside, and we're including you. We're saying, this isn't just the theater space, you're in the theater space. So I just by accident fell into it and decided to cast an acting company, see what we could do. And little by little, we worked on improvisation, and we, by experiment, trial and error, found out what worked. And what I landed on was the idea that there is a space to play. That play always incorporates a play space. The ancient Greek word for it that I use is temenos, which means sacred space. It's a sacred circle of space, not sacred in the religious sense, but sacred in the sense that it is a space separate from the real world, set apart for an act apart, with its own particular rules that obtain to that space. If you think about any kind of play, from football to LARP, it creates a kind of a space. And that if that space is safe for the players inside, it can then be turned outward as an invitation to the viewers or audience or guests or whatever to take part in that. And we do it by different things, like the way the characters in that show are built specifically for interaction. We have a character development technique where a characterization starts with a passion, and it's a single sort of transitive verb sentence. I rescue the imperiled. I illuminate ignorance, whatever it is, and the characters choose that as this character's single motivating active force in their being, right? That's why they get up in the morning. It's what they're passionate about doing. And we add to that a foible, which allows for the comedy of it. A foible is a human failing that we all have, and then that interrupts their ability to attain that passion. And there are virtues that redeem that foible and that kind of stuff. But the characters then choose needs, primary needs that they need. And here's the hook. Here's how we connect the audience, is that all of these characters are based upon urgent, passionate needs that can only be fulfilled by someone out there, by the audience or the guest.
Oh, so
right?
The players are key to the resolving of the conflict.
Yeah, everything they do and say, I need, if it's a Hollywood, show, and like my Street show at Disney, we had a character as a girl off the bus. Okay, little girl come to be a big star in Hollywood with a suitcase. What does she need? I need an agent. I need a place to live. And I need whatever it is, something else, like 2 or 3 basic needs. So all of their action and within the context of the show is geared toward a need that I need you. So there's that outwardness, and we land that in what we call an endowment, which is like, if there's an audience member watching a theatrical production, they're not part of it. They don't have a role in the play, but we give them one. We make an endowment, which is an assumption. We'll give them a name and imply an occupation or a place. So an endowment, so characters throw these endowments. It's not just, hey, you audience person. It's, Mr. Jones, the farmer down the road. Thank you so much for helping me, get those cats out of my attic. I'm very indebted to you, but I need something more. You know what I mean? So we give them a name, a mask to play, a role to play, in essence, because they're not going to come up with it themselves. And we connect them. There's a shared history. Every endowment character is known by the actor's character, either by reputation or personally. But there's something that character needs that only they can supply to them. Mm. And we find that really breaks the fourth wall, because one of the wonderful things I found out about interactive theater and human beings, which I wouldn't have otherwise assumed, is that every time, everywhere I go, every situation we encounter, no matter what kind of person they are, whether the big gruff, guy who doesn't want to be there and got dragged there, whatever it is, human beings love to help other people. It's one of the most endearing things we found out about interactive theater. You just poke them in their need to be helpful to other people, they will respond. You know what I mean? If there's a love situation with 2 characters, the romantic situation, the guy wants to tell the girl he loves her or whatever, and he doesn't know what to do. She doesn't seem to listen to him. You take that problem, that need to be fulfilled by, your average mom or grandma, you know what I mean? An older woman, boy, she will key into that. Look, come over here, buddy. I'll tell you exactly how to get that girl. Here's what you say. Here's what you do. You go do it, and it'll work. And in good improv tradition, they take that assumption, yes, and they go and do that. And the actors can craft the scene in a way that makes that suggestion work in a fun and dramatic way. Right. So it reinforces the audience members' willingness to take part, because the ideas that they offer are accepted first as true, it's right, it's correct, it's okay with me. We use that and we make it work in a fun and theatrical way that's successful. That imbues them with that agency to feel as though they can affect the outcome of things. And it really inspires them. It's connected through people's genuine desire to help another human being. So what gives us meaning and purpose when it comes down to it? Happiness is a sense of meaning. And if you really look at it, that the purposes and meanings people have in their life that really affect happiness is if it affects another human being in a positive way, you know.
Yeah, so this brings up an interesting question, that something that has come up in conversations I've had people, because I come from a game design background, and so when you talk about 10 MOs, that is the magic circle, as someone popped it into the chat there, which you also reference in the book, the Huizinga concept. But a lot of people from a theater background are worried about the amateur audience member ruining their show or their experience. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, this craft of turning the audience member into a performer is its own kind of craft. So I'd love to hear more about, as if I was an actor and I wanted you to tell me, how can I make the audience look good as performers? What would I do?
Right. Yeah, that reality where performers are improvising with audience members who are not improvisers, and they're not that good at it. So I'm constantly reminding them, you're the pro, you're the improviser. It's up to you to make those ideas work. You know, whenever someone gives you in improv, you know, any new premise in a scene, we call it an assumption, or some people call it an offer. It's a new idea, you know. And that idea has to be accepted as real and true and accepted by the other player, and then added to, right? That's the Spolin's yes and concept, the core of improv. But so the actors are good at that. They have to take whatever they offer them and remind them a lot. Yeah, they're going to give you some really terrible ideas, really odd, off the track, non sequitur tangent ideas, but it's your job to incorporate them. So and that's their job as an improviser. Take this idea. There's really no value to a particular idea when it comes down to it. The only value of an idea is its relation to other ideas and its relation to a context. And an improviser can shift the context. So they just change the reality to accept that thing and play with it. And it doesn't take long for a new audience member who's a terrible improviser to, once their offers are accepted and they go somewhere, it doesn't take long for them to really get the picture, and they can at least contribute in a way that is in a certain vein that the actor can move them through some interesting course of action. But it does take that determination to accept whatever it is.
So what? Can you tell us of an example that you could think of something ridiculous that an audience member proposed that an actor turned into something marvelous?
It's hard for me to come up with those counter things, because my conscious mind fights against them so much more. Okay, so
anecdote.
As opposed to yes and, there's no but. Or no and, right? So I don't know, Elizabethan character comes up and and says, Master Jones, Farmer Jones, you're the best farmer in the county, and boy, you're good with sheep, because my sheep were getting through the fence. You help me, blah, 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 blah. I need to talk about. And the response is, oh, I'm not a farmer, I'm a scientist. Okay, incorporate that. Incorporate farmer with scientist. Yes, I know. You're one of the best scientific farmer minds in the county. Why, you designed the newest sheep, whatever it is. So you take these non sequiturs and put them together. Things that don't fit together in improv are really an opportunity if you can step back and find the greater context. So a lot of times the weirdest thing where they say, no, I'm not that, I'm this, is something that a good improv mind can use to their advantage. And I guess that's sort of an example, a no but example. You get that a lot from people.
But that's interesting too, because you're also, I like that when you were saying, well, a farmer who thinks of themselves as a scientist is an interesting character.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
And the actor can build that character for the player, actually, and integrate them in a nice way. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other shows that you've done outside of the Renaissance Fair? Like, what would you say would be like in your sense, from an agency perspective, which is the thing, the playable theater community, we always harp on this idea of agency. What's an example of a show you did where you feel like the audience agency was really worked out perfectly and was the sort of high watermark of success in this space?
Right. What pops into mind is Joe's New York City bar, where we did it. We started at the Orlando Fringe Festival some years ago. Everything in my some years ago, we did this thing, but it was the Orlando Fringe. We got this building that was going to be demolished and turned it into a bar. It's a bar in the Village, New York City, and we actually made a bar and lights and seating, and we got a limited liquor license, and we served beer, and we put the sign outside, and so and it was, it's a Village bar. You walk in and everything was bar, except a few theater lights. Everything looked normal, and we had the bartender. And the idea was all these different characters would come in with their problems. There are a lot of social, relational problems that they come in, and there would be some conflicts. It's a loosely structured scenario, but certain plot points are hit and certain catharsises are had. And we set it up, and we even had people as guests walking in, but the audience didn't, walking up to it, you couldn't really tell it was a show till you walked in. We even had homeless people out in the parking lot under the thing, bother people a block away, and then that person would show up and interrupt things. But that was a lot of plants and that kind of stuff. Well, it turned into, once you start the conversations that'll key into people, social, we didn't get too far into politics, mostly about human interaction. People start speaking up, and before long, it's hard to tell what's the show and what's an actual event, which is really the kind of the gold standard of an interactive event. You can't tell what's fake and what's real, because characters come out of the audience who have something powerful to say, and other people agreeing and disagreeing. So at one point, I actually wonder where theater stops and where a happening begins. And we did that. We did it in several different versions of it, but that was one of the things where it was very easy for people to take over the show. And there are certain timings and plot points where the characters had to capture it back, and we knocked back into more prepared scenarios where the big catharsis or the breakup or the almost fist fight happens and that kind of stuff. But that kind of thing where there's a very real environment, and characters that are, for the most part, disguised as players, and information that really keys into people's thoughts and aspirations and hooks them. And you let those things mix, and then you have maximum audience agency, to the point where you're almost sometimes like, wow, last night, I don't know if we had a show or not, but it sure was interesting. It's almost like an Augusto Boal kind of event, he was the interactive guy way before me, that I looked at it, go, wow, that's cool. That's one of the.
How do you feel when that happens, when the audience takes over? As a creator, what is that? How do you feel about that?
A little frightened, as any improvisational thing should be, a little scary. But if you have techniques, the techniques of treating people, elevating the other person. Remember to elevate the other person. Remember defining who you are. Remember defining and redefining the context and action going on, and saying yes to them and adding their information, even if what you add takes it in a little different direction. Those are the techniques that help you regulate things. And bottom line is, as long as you show that you have a respect for another person's model of the world, you can capture them and you can lead them in a narrative back into something that fits the form that you've established. But it is work it's difficult, and it takes time to learn. You don't just put any actor into that kind of show. You put your veterans in there who are used to dealing with difficult situations like that. So
the first big LARP that I ever did, live action role playing game, was a vampire LARP at Dragon Con when I was living in Atlanta. And during the game, a whole series of things occurred which I thought were non-player characters, and turned out to be the players who were not happy with how the story was going and decided to just hijack it from the GMs. And what they came up with was much better. But I didn't even know till afterwards. I said, "Wow, those." I told my friend who brought me. I said, "Oh, those NPCs were so good." And she's like, "Those were players."
Those were
And
players.
you know,
Yeah.
I've been studying emergent online game behavior in online games for a while, and I found this really exciting. It was one of the things that got me interested in LARPs, was to see, oh, sometimes the audience can then kind of take over and become the performer in a way. And I feel like your point that I really like is that if your world is well designed and your actors know what they're doing, that's fine. You can allow, just as in improv, you want things to be a little out of control or they're not very fun, right? So
Right.
in the same way with LARPs, like Kelly and Pletcher, Adams Pletcher, who's going to be speaking later on today, the first big show she did in Boston, Club Drosselmeyer, one of the runs of the shows ended with all of the actors dying at the end. And
great ending.
everybody, yeah, and it was an ending that was available, but it was because the audience made certain choices that resulted in that. And
right.
it was all anybody was talking about the rest of the year was like, oh, this is the epic fail end. But it was exciting and it was dramatic and it was well crafted. So right. I think we have to think that way. And I really like what you said about respecting the audience, because I think that is really important. Like, you have to really trust the audience and respect them. And as you've sort of pointed out, and I've seen the same thing in games, if you give them the opportunity and the respect, they will rise to the occasion for the most part.
True. I was at Joe's New York City bar thing. We actually did have a homeless person wander in who had no clue they were in the show and started doing their thing, their take over the room thing. And even that, if you stay in context with the reality you've created, it's just another player. And
it's just
and with good improv, you can mold them by affirming them and giving them the next idea. It's not unlike kindergarten, really. People are basically children still in their psychology. So if you use child psychology, even at an old audience, it usually works.
It's like you can weave the real world into the tenemos somehow. I've done that in a LARP convention where I was in a LARP that was in one world, and then like another LARP kind of bled into the story. And I just role played that it was our neighbors who were always boffer LARPing in their backyard.
Right.
So there's always a way, I think, to tie those things together. I want to ask you about Disney, because I think you did some work with them, right? You did some theatrical interactive stuff. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, first of all, when was that, and a little bit about that process and what you both brought to that, and also what you learned from it.
A lot. Well, that started back when the Disney MGM studios opened. It's now the Hollywood Studios. Disney came up to see my show at Sterling. They'd heard about it through other Renaissance Connects and that kind of stuff. And saw my show, saw what I was doing with the actors, and they walked out at the end of the weekend saying, that's what we want at the parks. Because Eisner was there, and they were opening the studios, still being built at the point, but they wanted to go back to live actor stuff. What they found out was that Walt was not entirely correct, that a mechanical actor is easier and more efficient and less expensive than a flesh and blood actor. Because they still make them, but like, wow, this is really not what we thought. So they wanted to go back to live actors. So I was part of a group of 3 people, me, Craig McNair Wilson, and Bernie Solins, who opened Second City. He's kind of owns Second City. He's not like he's Nichols or May. Big, interesting person. So the 3 of us were brought in really as consultants to answer the question, how do we use live actors in this theme park? And they had all these things lined up that they wanted to do. One of them was the Hollywood Boulevard characters. The main section as you enter is old 1940s Hollywood. Well, we wanted the people with Hollywood characters. So
is it the MGM park? Is that?
Yeah, it's the MGM Park in Orlando, Florida. I love that
park.
So Craig and I mostly devised this thing. We ended called Street Atmosphere. I liked it. I liked it Atmosphere better, but we went with Street Atmosphere. And I thought 30 characters, cabbies and cops and film directors and actresses and gossip columnists and all
Like there
kinds of
was a
things.
roller skater. I feel like I
Right.
saw somebody roller skating in that
Yeah, well, if you
area.
see it now, it's not like it was in the 90s, said the director who who left saying, look, just don't reinvent the wheel, promise me. But it was an interesting thing because we said, well, they said to us, the director level people, how are you going to do the show? Well, we're going to improvise it. Well, okay, but what's the show going to be? Well, we set certain parameters and we improvise it. Okay, but how are you going to write the scripts? We're not going to write the scripts. Okay, but what are you going to put in the scripts? Like we finally they hired a team of writers to write the improv for all of these characters. And we're like, finally, we tried to explain to them, no, that's not how improv works. And we couldn't get them to understand that improv would work in a performance setting. So first day of rehearsals, we took a stack of I don't know, like this big, a stack of scripts that all these people have written, just threw them in the trash basket and started rehearsing. And that was a really fast. I mean, it's like 7 days a week, every day, 365 days a year, 33 actors, 1 year contracts. And I had to reach into my director bag of tricks, undo the bottom seam of the bag, reach through the bag into the ground to try to keep that ensemble together. It doesn't work unless you have a really good, positive, trusting ensemble. And this actors were like, this is my livelihood. I got a house and a car now and kids, and I can't lose this contract. And this is important to me. So it was challenging to do an ongoing, constant creative ensemble 24/7. And that taught me a lot about the technique, the solutions I had to find during my 7 to 10 Disney years there really helped craft that book because I got put in a situation of how do we get out of this, and we had to find a way. And that each little piece became part of the technique. It's really fun. I love those Disney years, but boy, it drained you. I was at the end of it, I'm like, okay, I've done it. I gotta go. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's really a formative thing.
Yeah, I really am curious because also, they're going to be opening their first LARP hotel next year. And I'd love to, once it opens, it'd be interesting to see, because they're going to give audience characters and let them wear costumes, which they've never done before. So it's a whole new level of that kind of participation.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I think, it's expensive, but it's it's going to be awesome, I think. I think it's a thing that people have wanted, like you said. I mean, one thing I think is really timely, and why I think this is having a resurgence now, is because we're in a moment of participatory culture and adult play is now okay. People cosplay and they go to escape rooms and they do all these things. And, when you were starting, I remember when I started designing games in the 80s, and my boss was like, adults need to play more. Same idea that you were talking about. And at that time, they weren't. And even like in New York City in the 80s, video game arcades were illegal. So there weren't a lot of environments for adults to play, unless it was like a billiards parlor or something, maybe a little seedy. But I think that's really changed now, especially because we have all of these multimedia worlds, like, people want to go and dress up as the Black Panther or whatever and go do these immersive experiences. Yeah. I want to go back to.
Can you say, and we talked about this in our correspondence, how happy I am about all that stuff. When I wrote this book, finished it in 97, so I wrote through the 90s. I was convinced that the world needed to understand interactive theater because it was going to explode. Because our need for play outside of our little cubicles, you remember the 80s and 90s, if you can. I was like, wow, we really need this. And I thought, I'm at the top of this new genre, and things are going to change. Well, like I told you, it's like, well, it took 20 years. It's like, I'm like, when is this going to happen? Which is why I'm so happy. And maybe it's the advent of the digital age and the internet or it took that long, but now it is. In the last 4 or 5 years, all this stuff is blossoming, and I'm just tickled to see it, and I've been waiting for a long time.
It's great.
It's important.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also, I don't know if you were able to catch the roundups earlier, but Tom Mansfield from Upstart was talking about his company and how they would do these linear shows, and then they would go home and play video games. And at some point, they were like, we need to figure out how to connect these two together. I know Jamie, who was running that session, actually came to the US and got a game design degree after having a career in theater. So these two areas are coming together, which is really what our whole initiative in this event is about. I want to grab a little nugget of something you said earlier, because it's something that's really nagging at me, which is that we don't really know what a script looks like for participatory theater. We kind of know what it looks like for LARP. If you want to run a LARP, you get the LARP design document with whatever appendices, character sheets or whatever, and you can run the LARP just like you can run a Dungeons and Dragons session, for instance. But when I've been asking, because I'm trying to create a database where collectively that the nonprofit is trying to start building a database, both of scripts that people can license to run and also just for reference so we know what one looks like. And it turns out there kind of aren't really any. Like I've asked people and I'd be like, well, what is the script for your show? And they're like, oh, there's no script. It's a diagram, or it's so how do we, if you wanted to get someone to, let's say, run Joe's bar, like what, obviously there wasn't really a script there, but how do you rectify that?
Well, it kind of was. I mean, it's a broad question because it depends on how improvisational the show is and what context the show is in. But yeah, for something like Joe's New York City Bar, we had a script, sort of. I mean, like usually at like the Renaissance Festival, we'll put on the schedule a show, a 20-minute comedy show on a stage in a particular location at a time that we call a scenario. It's devised theater, basically. We work it from improvisation. Here's this idea, that, okay, improv, run it through again. There's no script, but everyone knows how it goes, and it repeats in the same way pretty much every time. And it has these little doorways for interaction that are embedded into it. It's kind of like that with Joe's. We did have a written script, but it would be pieces of dialogue that led to a plot point or a difficulty. And then it was notes on what could happen in that, but not a script. We did go in and out of scripts where we wanted to click back in and get more control of the show, because you can't just have it open for like an hour and a half. It kind of drifts. We want to click back in to little scripted sections that hopefully didn't look or sound too scripted. That would segue into the open parts where we rehearse it over and over again. We'd have people come in and throw different ideas at it, so the players had a sense of it. But it was down to sort of a description of what would happen and how it would connect back into the next script point. If that makes any sense. That's the scriptiest that I've ever done. Renaissance Festival stuff is the show is based. It's an open audience, open flow audience. There isn't a unity of audience if you're just doing characters at a theme park, right? Like in a play, it's not one set of people are seeing the thing from beginning to end. It's all a soup. So your plot is a plot soup. And what I've done is I tie it to the characters. Each character is basically carrying their own play on their back, because they have their objectives and their conflicts and their possible resolutions, all depending on what they get in the outer world.
Do the actors get, like, would I get essentially, like, that sounds to me like a LARP character sheet. Like would they get something like that? It's like, here's your character, here's your objectives.
Yeah, similar to that, very similar to it. I try, in teaching actors, I try not to make it too rote, because if you get too descriptive on it, sometimes they lose their creativity. My light just came on. Oh,
just when you said creativity, it was kind of
perfect thing in the house.
Perfect.
But yeah, I have. I'm careful about it, but I have character sheets where they just decide certain aspects of the character, like I talked about, the passion, the foible, the virtues, the origin of these things, why they're that way, what are their primary needs. With primary needs go into primary activities, and then into active choices that they do in performance, kind of thing. And there are sheets that they fill these things out. But I haven't gone down to what is your attitude or aptitude on this or that. But I've kept it
And it sounds
broadish like that.
sounds like some of those characters you sort of co-create with the actors through some devising, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the way I do it, I mean, the actors create the characters. I will cast an occupation. You are the Lord Mayor of the town, or you are a washerwoman or a thief, and that's as far as I go. My process of rehearsal is developing those choices, clear choices that I know will work in performance with that actor. So it's almost kind of like a European clowning kind of thing, where the character does come from the actor's essence, which makes it so easy for them to play, because they're drawing to some extent on themselves, but they're defining this other character. So yeah, so it's drawn from the actor, which is I'm sure quite a lot like LARP. I mean, if you develop your LARP character, you have an internal connection to that. You've made those choices because that's how you see yourself internally, or would like to see yourself, that kind of stuff. Same sort of thing with that kind of character development. I explain it, I describe it as kind of a mosaic. You can't develop a whole human personality and improvise it consistently, because human beings are a pretty broad thing, but you define it into these little choices, these tiles in the mosaic. You embed those tiles, and at a distance, the thing sort of merges into a whole vision kind of thing. That's my metaphor for character development in interactive theater.
It's interesting too how for me with LARPs, what's nice is, and you talked about this a lot, like the idea of the tenemos as the sort of, I call it making a player shaped whole. Like I like LARPs where they give me a little bit to work with, but not too much. So I can put my own creativity into it. I have a quick question. I wanted to see if we could grab a couple of audience questions, but I wanted to just ask you because you mentioned rehearsals, and I was wondering if you ever have audience members. Do you do what we call play testing in the game racket? Do you rehearse with audience members?
Test the characters in the shows with an audience?
Yeah.
Before the production starts? I've done some of that. So some of the people in and around the festival who come dressed up and that kind of stuff, I'll have a dress rehearsal day. We'll invite some of them, and they can do throw things at them. It's really hard to simulate an audience for interactive theater. It's why I tell the actors, like, the first weekend of this festival, don't tell anyone, but it's your dress rehearsal. And after the first week, we bring things back into the rehearsal, say what worked, what didn't, because there's really nothing that can compare to an actual audience, but you can come close. Even in rehearsals, I will divide the cast into two. You're going to be guests, and you're going to be your characters, and you do these interactions. And sometimes actors are.
So the actors will sometimes take the role of that.
Yeah, shirts and skins, cool. So to speak.
Great. Cool. Yeah. All right. I think we could do like one or two questions real quick. Okay. Does anyone in the chat want to lob us a question? Maybe not. I don't know. People have been yammering this whole time, which is exciting to me. That means they're enjoying it.
That's good. I'm trying to.
I don't see. I see just comments coming in, some of which I've actually worked into the conversation already. I guess we don't seem to have any more.
See, we've explained everything so well.
Oh, so this is interesting, Carl, and it relates back to a question that somebody else asked. So this is actually a nice way to end, actually. Somebody earlier made a comment about the homeless person. And I think that there have been some conversations around, in the Huizinga magic circle, right? You have to go by choice into the magic circle, but sometimes people don't know they're in a show, or they don't know they're in a theatrical performance. And Carl refers to that as invisible. We also have talked about it as sort of non-consensual play or whatever. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And
yeah, I'm thrilled when that happens. I love when that happens. It's just a great challenge. Someone like it wanders in and doesn't know it's a show kind of thing. Generally, the actors have them play along, see if you could get them to involve them what's going on, and see if they get the picture themselves. If it becomes a disturbing, contentious, or a thing that really is counterproductive to the production, I will go so far as having an actor make an excuse to bring them a little bit aside and just sort of, hey, you're in a show. did you know that? Okay, yeah, love to have you
Oh,
here.
in case you,
But
in
here's what's
case you
going to
feel like
happen
they
next.
don't. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You know, in a very positive, supportive way, and it's still an invitation, but like, we just want to let you know that this is going on. Oh, and they'll either leave or go, all right, I'm already here. I've already contributed, so I'll continue, you know. It's an interesting thing when it happens. Like, I love it.
So you kind of need to basically, if a person comes in unaware, you kind of have to let them know at some point that they're in a play space. I think it sounds like
it's
saying.
the ethical thing to do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they could be very insulted and, you know, and feel like they have had the wool pull over their eyes. So I think it's important to not like, if they don't get it themselves soon, to let them know, because it's almost, you know, yeah, I think it's ethical to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a good place to end. We're right at noon. Thank you. Gosh, I am just so excited. Like I found out about you. I sent you an email. You answered immediately, and you were like, "Yes, I'm in."
Yeah,
so,
it's great.
And you now have a fan club because everyone is writing in here. Where do we get the book? How do we talk to Gary?
It's funny that you say that, because I've been watching cable news, and you know,
the Zoom.
I'm not saying that you know, available on Amazon.com. But yeah, isn't that great? Like the news, all these guys have their books behind them. So I thought I'd do it too, you know.
Yeah, but you can tell who reads their books. Like Fauci reads his books. You can tell by how they're piled up behind him.